So I've been a food blogger for 4 years now, and I've been a dietitian for 5 years. And one thing that I have learned is that either folks don't love cooking, they don't feel confident cooking, or you just don't have the time or energy to cook. And I completely understand that. So I have this new series that follows along with my goal of making plant-based eating easier. It's all about ingredient component prep. This isn't meal prep. This is a great option if you find meal prep intimidating or you just don't enjoy making all of the same meals on one day and enjoying them throughout the week. I personally don't love doing that. So this is actually how I eat. So I am a recipe developer. I am cooking a lot throughout the week, but I do rely on this method for planning out my meals during the week, just so that I have kind of a general idea of what I'll be eating. So this is a much requested style of video and style of recipe. So I do plan to make this a monthly video series. I'm usually going to center around proteins for these videos just because I find that protein is one of the easiest ways to add flavor to meals, and it also can be the most intimidating thing to prep for meals. So there is a very easy framework to follow to get this done. First up, we are going to choose our protein to prep, and by we, I mean me, because I'm going to give this idea to you. Second part is that I'm going to give you 3 or 4 meal ideas in the video, and I'm also going to make a PDF for you to look at so that you can see these meal ideas and see how I kind of plan them throughout the week. And that brings us to 3, which is making the grocery list. This is probably the most important part, and it's the part where you can really do whatever you want. So you can just refer to that PDF and the videos and do the exact same things that I'm doing, or you can look at it and say, you know what, I don't really like romaine lettuce, I'm gonna do spinach, or I don't really like broccoli, I'm gonna do cauliflower. Simple swaps like that. Ideally, this is just inspiration for you to see how you can plan out some balanced meals using one staple ingredient. So once you have that ready, it's time to cook the main ingredient. This week, I am doing seasoned black beans, starting so simply with just black beans. Like nothing over the top. But ideally, these beans are going to be very flavorful because they are the centerpiece of every meal. I usually cook my beans in the Instant Pot. I find it's really easy and quick, and it's also cheaper to use dry beans. But I'm gonna show you how to do this with canned beans because I realize we don't all have Instant Pots. So back when I was working with patients, I would talk about the plate method. So if we think of our 9-inch plate, ideally 1/4 of that is going to be your protein. That usually ends up being about 1/2 cup of beans, but that's gonna differ for everyone. So this recipe makes a total of 3 cups of beans. That's going to be 5 to 6 meals if you're going with that 1/2 cup portion. But definitely adjust this based on your appetite, based on how many people you are making meals for. I'm personally doing this method just for myself, so I am very okay with just 3 cups of beans. So 1 cup of dry beans makes 3 cups of cooked beans, and 1 15-ounce can of beans makes 1.5 cups of beans. So for this recipe, you'll be using 2 cans of beans. I want this to be like a blank slate, but still flavorful. So I'm gonna start by sauteing a red onion in about a tablespoon of oil. I like to sprinkle it with salt to draw out some of that moisture. And then I'm going to mix in 1/2 teaspoon of smoked paprika and a teaspoon of chili powder. That's just to add a little extra depth, a little bit of smokiness to these beans. And then once it's turning golden, I will add in veggie bouillon. I do recommend picking up a jar of this if you've never cooked with it before. It is a really easy way to save money because buying vegetable stock really adds up and it's not even that flavorful. And B, it just tastes really good. I'm just using a tablespoon of bouillon, and then I'm gonna mix in about 1 cup of water. Add it slowly so that the bouillon mixes into the water, and then go ahead and add in your 3 cups of black beans. Bring that up to a boil over high heat, and once it's boiling, we're just gonna reduce that back down to medium-low and simmer it for about 15 minutes. The longer you simmer, the more flavorful they will be, so you could leave this pot on the stove for an hour. Just make sure to stir it every so often and make sure all that water doesn't evaporate. So I store these beans with their broth because it'll just continue to flavor them when they're in the fridge. But for most of these recipes, I do serve them with a slotted spoon to get that liquid off of the beans. So the idea with ingredient prep is that you have your main protein ready to go every day of the week. And the other components, sure, you can prep in advance if you want, but I usually just make right before serving because most of them don't take too much time or too much effort. So for this recipe, I am making potato and black bean bowls. I love potatoes. I love air fried potatoes so much. You can also roast the potatoes if you prefer, but that is the part of this recipe that's going to take a little extra time. So I make Cajun seasoned roasted potatoes. And then I'm using leftover sauteed veggies from another recipe. Or you can use a frozen veggie medley. That'll be really quick, easy, and low effort. And something that's really important about a meal like this, because it really is just your protein, grain, and veggie, is to have something that brings it all together. And for me, that is a pesto aioli. You can also just use regular pesto if you're not much of an aioli person. But for the pesto aioli, I just mix together pesto and some vegan mayo, equal parts. So simple, but like really easy to make your own. So you can add pumpkin seeds, you can switch up the veggies, you can add some hot sauce, some cheese. It's up to you. Moving on to that next recipe, I'm going to show you how I make these very super simple black bean bowls. I promise all of these recipes aren't bowls, but I do love making bowls because they're so versatile. For this one, our grain is rice, and a really easy way to save time with rice is to buy frozen rice. Don't knock it until you try it. You can get frozen rice at Trader Joe's, and it is available at most grocery stores in the freezer aisle. For this recipe, I did white rice. I just like it better than brown rice. And pro tip, if you are making white rice at home, I recommend making like double the amount you need, because then you'll have leftover white rice, which is perfect for fried rice. Very easy 15-minute meal to just throw together on the stove with like leftover veggies, frozen veggies, some tofu, edamame. Yes, I have another recipe for that too, and I will link it down below in the description as usual. So if we're using that plate method I talked about earlier, ideally we'll fill about half those bowls with veggies. So for me, something I like doing is romaine, some quick pickled onions, some corn, which is a starchier veggie, but still a veggie nonetheless. And I also like to add things like pumpkin seeds, guacamole, and salsa. The good news about these ingredients is that we can use them across most of these meals this week, so you won't just be buying guacamole or salsa and then using it for one recipe. No, we are using these ingredients multiple ways. This one also has a sauce, so I made this chipotle dressing. This would be something you could prep ahead of the week if you want to save a little bit of time, because it'll keep in the fridge for a week. I'm using chipotle powder to keep things super simple. A lot of the time I will use canned chipotle chilies. That is a great way to add flavor, and I do it about half the time, but it's also less convenient, and this series is all about convenience. Another time-saving tip is just to buy your dressing at the store. Next up, this is something I eat all the time, is quesadillas with black beans. So for these black beans, I had shredded cheddar on hand, so that's what I used. So use whatever cheese you like. I also add some spinach for veggies. So I actually make my quesadillas in the air fryer. I just make them at 350 for like 4 or 5 minutes, and it's so easy that way. You can make them on the stove if you prefer, or if you don't have an air fryer. In order to really make sure I'm getting that veggie component in, I'm also adding some diced onion I had. You could also add some quick pickled onions if you have those on hand. And then I had some leftover avocado from breakfast, so I added that, and some cherry tomatoes that were honestly on their way out, but they got the job done. And then I do have a bonus recipe for you. I wouldn't necessarily consider this a meal unless you adjust the portions to make it meal-sized for you. But this is a snack idea using black beans. So what I like to do is take half a cup of black beans or so and mash them up with a fork so that I have a bit of a dip. You can heat this in the microwave prior to eating it for a warm bean dip, or just serve it cold if you're cool with that. I personally prefer heating it up. In these snack boxes, we are also adding some guacamole. So this is some guacamole I made fresh because I had a bunch of avocados this week. But a really convenient thing to do actually is to buy those little snack size packs of guacamole. That way you can kind of eat them with different meals throughout the week and they won't turn brown or go bad. And for veggies, this week the garden did provide. I got a pickling cucumber, which I eat not as a pickle, but as a cucumber. And I also got this sweet little bell pepper. So I added those as my veggie components and I dipped them with the black beans and with the guacamole. And I always need some sort of crunch and salty factor, but these also count as the carbohydrate portion of this meal, tortilla chips. If you did want to make this into a meal, I would recommend maybe adding some tortillas on the side, or you could add in some of those potatoes if you have an extra serving. Hopefully you find this way of thinking about ingredient prep helpful. Just a reminder, this is not a one-size-fits-all approach, so if it doesn't work for you, that's cool. Hopefully it gave you some good inspiration. If you have any questions, definitely let me know down below. My goal, as I say over and over again, is just to make eating plant-based easier for you. I'll be back with my regular style of videos next week, but I will have another part to this series, maybe in about a month, and it will be centered around tofu. If you have any specific requests of type of ingredient prep, or maybe certain things you want me to cover about ingredient prep, you can let me know down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching.